Hello and welcome to the Rogers Brief. I'm Adam Rogers. Thank you for watching and thank you for listening. It's day 14 of the Mass Casualty Commission proceedings just completed now today. And today was focused on some testimony from Constables Craig Hubley and Ben MacLeod. Those two individuals were the ones who ended the gunman's rampage by shooting him dead at the Big Stop in Enfield. And so we heard about this yesterday at the during the foundational document presentation, but today we got to hear directly from the two officers. Now, that choice in itself was certainly a significant choice to have the officers testify, particularly now before a long weekend, particularly before a long break in proceedings. The two very heroic officers who killed the gunman will be the last thing on people's minds. So that was certainly a significant, if you'd call it editorial or presentation choice, to put them forward at this time rather than, say, the officers Brown and Melanson, who we now know had 3 near blue-on-blue shooting incidents during the 13 and a half hours. So that was certainly a choice, but regardless, there they were, and they testified very well. Anybody that watched it would certainly be impressed with both officers and their ability to answer questions and recall events, that sort of thing. There was, at the start of the day, I mentioned this yesterday now, I'd kind of expected after yesterday's proceedings, now at the end of the day yesterday, you'll recall, there were submissions from different lawyers on the gaps in evidence in the foundational documents and in just procedural problems. And there were some very direct and, pointed comments, respectful but direct. And I thought the commissioners may come out this morning and provide some reaction to that and talk about how the process may evolve, but they didn't do so. So that was, I thought, noteworthy. Now, it was certainly an intense, emotional day in terms of the testimony that was forthcoming from the officers. Now, one of the things as a lawyer, and one of the most important skills as a lawyer, is to have sort of emotional control and detachment. I mean, you need to be able to recognize and understand the emotions of situations, of participants, of people may have in certain scenarios, but not be drawn in emotionally yourself. So maintaining a detachment in that regard, so that you can do your best kind of clear-headed analysis. So that's one of the things I bring to this. So, even though you get this very intense sort of first-person account of the Irving Big Stop incident and some discussion earlier from Constable Hubley about a dog rescue, certainly you try to keep from getting overwhelmed by those emotions yourself. So the first thing actually Constable Hubley spoke about was in Portapique itself. He was at the Macaulay residence and saw that the killer had shot the family dog. And he said this was particularly, now Constable Hubley is a dog handler. That's why he was there that night, and he was working with the emergency response team, the ERT squad. Now, he said the dog was only about 20 pounds. It was certainly no threat to anybody, but the killer shot the dog. And so that really demonstrated to him the vindictiveness and the potential danger of this individual. So that was a significant fact for Constable Hubley. Now, Constable MacLeod was the other individual that was in the Suburban at the Irving Big Stop at the end. He was also involved back in the Portapique situation. In fact, he was one of the officers that brought Lisa Banfield out of Mr. Jodry's home and gave her some initial treatment. He is a medic. He trained medic himself. Now, he did note in his statement, and this was brought out not in the leading testimony from Commission Counsel, but rather from Michael Scott in cross-examination later, that Constable MacLeod noted in his report at the time that there was no significant injuries to Miss Banfield. He said she was very disheveled, more disheveled than he'd ever seen somebody, but not significant injuries. He also relayed that Miss Banfield had mentioned that she thought the killer's plans were to kill her, go to Dartmouth and kill his sister, and then go travel to Moncton to kill his parents. And we know from some reports that the killer did have a very, acrimonious relationship with his family, which stretched back many years. And so it's not surprising, if true, that this may have been his plan. And if you think of it from that perspective, it can help explain some of his actions in Portapique proper. Perhaps he was looking for Miss Banfield as he began his rampage, and then when he couldn't find her but knew the things were closing in on him, perhaps with the officers showing up at the head of the road, left by another exit and then tried to get himself to Dartmouth, and just causing mayhem along the way to distract the police or keep them from finding him. So we'll see. That doesn't explain everything. It certainly doesn't explain the MacLeod Jenkins killings and the visit to their home, but there may be unrelated explanations for that, so we'll see. Now, a significant part of the information that I've seen from the Big Stop actually was not presented either yesterday or today, and that is the video of the shootings, of the final moments of the killer's life. There is video. It exists. The media have been provided with copies of it. Now, I was talking to Sheldon MacLeod about this earlier. I know Frank Magazine was tweeting about this today, that they've received copies of the video, but under conditions from the Mass Casualty Commission that they don't publish it, they don't share it, and that after they've viewed it, that they must destroy it. Now, to me, this is really improper. I've seen the video. Like I said, it's not graphic, other than there's shots fired in the video, but you don't see anything terribly graphic or gruesome in the video. And the commission hasn't explained why they wouldn't show. I mean, this is the best kind of evidence you could possibly have for an incident, but instead they relied on witness statements and still photos from the video. Now, still photos do show a different kind of perspective than a video. In the video, if you watch it, it happens very quickly. The officers get out and almost instantaneously start shooting. And so it can lead to an impression that they knew the killer was there. Whereas if you just look at the still photos and you see, all right, a second or 2 seconds have passed or something, well, it gives a different impression, something a little more, where there was more thought involved, some time to reflect or plan actions during those few seconds, which is not apparent if you watch the video. So I know that was a deliberate choice by the commission. They didn't explain the choice, and the video has not been played. So that was, I thought, a significant problem with the evidence today and yesterday. Now, Constable Hubley, another thing that came up. Now, Constable Hubley was explaining why they went to the Big Stop, and he explains that they'd been started off that morning in Halifax with a Suburban with a full tank of gas, and had been driving around for a while, and thought this was an opportunity to fill up the tank. Well, 2 things on that. One is that Constables Hubley and MacLeod both stated that this was a moment during the unfolding events where they thought they were very close to the killer. They knew that he had just had the confrontations with Constables Morrison and Stevenson just minutes prior, and was certainly or most likely in the area, and they stopped for gas. The other thing is, Constable Hubley said he had less than half a tank. Now, different people have different views on what less than half a tank would prompt you to do, but if you think the killer's within a few kilometers, perhaps, and you have half a tank of gas, maybe you wait till you get under a quarter tank or under an eighth of a tank before you start panicking, or well, he didn't panic, but before you start thinking about filling up the tank with gas. So questions weren't asked, but that was the comment from Constable Hubley, that it was less than half a tank. So we'll see if that emerges in later testimony. Now, the officers, when they get to the tank, they're on the opposite side of the same pump, basically, as the killer, and they look over. Constable Hubley, I thought it was a really good description on his part, said he looked like a prize fighter between rounds. He was sitting there. He hadn't gotten out of the car yet to try to fill up his own vehicle with gas. He was bleeding, untreated wound on his forehead, white shirt, looked to be sweating, and just gave that that impression of somebody, like I said, a prize fighter, like Constable Hubley said, a prize fighter between rounds. But they saw him. Constable Hubley recognized him, showed it out to his partner. He says that it's him, Benny, it's him. And then as soon as the killer started reaching for a gun, starting to raise a gun, then they opened fire on him and killed him. Now, a significant fact that came out yesterday for the first time, and here we are 2 years on, was that the killer tried to kill himself and actually did shoot himself in the head. Now, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Bose explained that, while that would have killed him, in fact, he died before it had the chance to kill him because of the shots. There were 23 shots fired from the two officers into his body, and so that is what killed him. But he did also try to kill himself. Significant fact. It goes to the motivations and the planning of the perpetrator in these situations. So that was interesting. Now, another thing that I thought was kind of interesting. Oh, so the officers also, they kept shooting. That seems like a lot of shots, but it's, they say it's unlikely that just one or two bullets is definitely going to stop somebody or kill somebody. So they kept firing. The other thing was Constable Hubley mentioned they weren't sure whether, because he had all these police things, whether he may have had body armor, and so they kept firing for those reasons, which all makes sense to me. Now, that all happened very quickly, just in a matter of seconds, and then they moved for cover behind the Suburban while the rest of the ERT squad moves in behind the Mazda 3 to secure the body at that point. Nobody asked, I guess these Constable Hubley and MacLeod didn't do this part, but why would they put him in cuffs at that point when he was clearly dead? I'm not clear. The other thing that was, so many questions were asked about whether the officers knew that Wortman was there before they showed up at the big stop. And like I say, when you watch the video, it looks like, it certainly would make sense watching the video to say, oh, they knew he was there, because they get out and immediately start shooting. Although the place where they stopped wouldn't make sense if they knew that, because they were in very close proximity to him and in danger themselves. It would make more sense if they knew he was there to park behind him or do something like that. So that there's things that go in both directions in that question. Roger Burrell, Commission Counsel, asked Constable Hubley whether they had any instructions to execute Gabriel Wortman, and the answer was no. I knew that would be the answer, but it was interesting. I think that was the first time I've heard the name of the perpetrator uttered by Mr. Burrell or anybody on Commission Council. Maybe I missed something, but they've been studiously trying to avoid saying his name, but they said it there. So that was all very interesting. Very dramatic testimony coming from the Irving Big Stop. If you certainly accept what the officers have said, very quick thinking on their part, and proper technique and all those things. So the afternoon then afterwards, there were some questions, cross-examination questions, and we saw this sort of conglomeration of questions through two lawyers in this case. There was Michael Scott from Patterson Law, and then Josh Bryson from Chester Law. Josh Bryson represents the Bond family. His questions were mostly to do with the searching of Cobequid Court, what Constable MacLeod in particular was with the ERT squad going around Portapic, checking on homes, what he recalled or remembered about the Cobequid Court portion of that, and really he didn't remember anything. He said if it wasn't broadcast over the radio as an address, he would have a hard time remembering it now. The reason those questions were being asked is that the Bond family, as I understand, was not found by the officers until late in the afternoon on Sunday the 19th. So there's some questions about why their home hadn't been searched earlier. Michael Scott's questions were twofold. One was in relation to Miss Banfield, and so he asked some of the questions about her health presentation that that Constable MacLeod identified. The second, and I've talked about that, but the second part was the preparation and the actions of these two officers. And people will be watching these questions thinking, well, they seem to have done everything right. Why is he asking those questions? Well, because they prepared properly, they had their gear ready, they had Constable Hubley had studied Wortman's photograph, and that's why he was able to identify him. He had studied the vehicle photo, so he'd be able to identify the vehicle if he came across the mock police cruiser. And then even in the shooting technique of Constable MacLeod at a certain angle, because he's 6'6", and all of these things, everything seemed to go quite well. And Michael Scott was asking about that. not to be critical of these officers, I would suggest to you, but rather to build them up in order to compare those to the actions of some of the other officers that were involved, the frontline officers that maybe didn't live up to that high standard. So that was the reason for those questions, because at some point you'll hear Michael Scott say, well, Constables Hubley and MacLeod did this, this, and this, which is all very good. Compare that to these other officers who didn't take those kind of actions or make those kind of preparations or think about the kind of communication lines that these two did. So very interesting day. Like I said, an emotionally packed testimony. Very, very important things. Still waiting to hear more of a response from the Commission to some of the criticisms. Perhaps that will happen when they've had some more time to reflect, either over the holiday, over the break, and come back on the 24th, 25th, I believe, is the next day is Monday. I think I'll be attending in person that day. There's an event in Halifax the day before that I think I'll be attending, so I'll tell more about that as the days approaches. Next week, there's no commission hearings. It's the anniversary, of course, of the events, the 2-year anniversary, so that's really one of the reasons. From my own perspective, I'll be in hearings next week with the Desmond Inquiry doing closing submissions, so people who are interested in seeing a comparison, we won't be doing any witnesses, but there'll be closing submissions, and you'll get to catch up on all of the details of that very important work as well. So that's Tuesday and Wednesday next week, and I'll be doing my closing submissions on Wednesday afternoon, the 20th. So I may or may not be posting anything in the meantime. I have lots of work to do to prepare that closing and review some of the other submissions, but certainly if anything important arises, I will be back to talk about it. Otherwise, thank you for watching and thank you for listening. I did an interview with Sheldon MacLeod on the Saltwire network today as well. That'll be posted, and I'll post a link to that too once it is up. So until then, until next time, we'll see you then. All right, thank you for watching.